We had an accident. Oh, I don't know what happened to it. Maybe that was somebody's personal.
I used to just lie in there
We
somewhere.
used to sit up here and used to hit it with. Does anybody know where the gong is?
I thought it was in there.
All that's in there is the bell. That's
You know, I wonder, I thought it was in there, but I wonder if Leanne brought it, and maybe when she left, she took it. Leanne, she might have brought that. But I thought it was before she left.
You look very cool in summer. Yes, oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And comfort is the day, yes. So it turns out my whole career has been bookended by blue eggs. So, yeah, I'm retired, yes.
Good morning and welcome to First Universalist Church in New Madison, Father's Day. This will be fun. Father's Day has kind of a upbeat connotation, but it's not so upbeat for everybody, and as people who see my proclivity to look on the dark side, we'll be getting an entire picture of Father's Day today. So there will be good stuff, but there will also be the bad stuff. Do we have any announcements? Looking about church board, not having church board for June?
Not June, July.
Not having it for July. Okay, one thing that's under discussion, and everybody can tell by the way it is today, this place is sweltering. We're going to do some investigation on air conditioning, and we're not going to air condition the whole church. That would cost like $30,000. What we're talking about is 2 units on each side, or 1 unit on each side, that just blow cold air across the pews for an hour on a Sunday. And that can be done through various different ways, so we're going to investigate that and just see what the expense would be. For 5 or 6 people for an hour a week, that may not be worth it. It may just give you all little electric powered fans with a mister on them.
Couple ice cubes.
What's that?
Couple ice cubes.
Yes, ice cube. Actually, speaking of ice cube, I have lemonade and I made ice, and there's a cooler back there with ice and a set of tongs. So after church, if you want to have lemonade, iced lemonade, we'll have to use the regular cups. I'm thinking as much as we want to be green, we might as well get disposable cups because that's a lot of work to wash them out. But anyway, there will be lemonade. There's frozen cookies now, but they'll be thawed by the time that church is over. So feel free to partake on that. Yes?
When is the joint picnic with El Dorado?
That will be July 4th. That's Sunday.
Okay.
And we're meeting at the park.
10:30.
10:30, not 10 o'clock. You can come at 10 o'clock. And the last understanding is this is a BYO, bring your own. And then if you want to bring something to share with other people, do that, or else bring a long-handled wooden spoon to tap their hands when they reach into your basket. So, but their tradition is that they just bring everything themselves. It's not like a carry-in.
And we'll provide drinks.
We will?
We provide drinks.
We're providing drinks, okay. So just be prepared for anything, just like you always are. Okay. Our welcome is Exhaling in Community by Christine Slocum. Your breath is always with you. That's a common meditation prompt. Remember when we used to breathe all over each other? Pre-pandemic, we stood behind each other in the grocery line, chit-chatted before meetings, or sat next to each other in church. There was a clear line of sight to each other's noses, and the sounds of our voices were unobstructed by fabric. My unrestricted exhales didn't put me out of the right relationship with those around me. The virus changed how we understand the consequences of breathing. I used to breathe without thinking. If I was breathing mindfully, it was in the context of meditation or yoga. Breath was a life force or a tool of centering oneself. Now we know the way we take up space includes where our breath goes. But breath is also a vector of illness. With over 500,000 people deceased and many in my community, I could not ignore the potential power I had to spread illness. I don't like how something so fundamental to my being could cause harm. I also couldn't deny it. Masking up became so normal I felt naked in public without it. I learned to cross the street whenever I saw anyone on the sidewalk. I chose to forego unneeded interpersonal interaction. It's been a lonely year. My own understanding of personal space aligned with the collective revision to 6 feet. Even after receiving the vaccine and the requisite time elapsing to immunity, my instincts to avoid other people are still very sharp. I could still harm. I miss the innocence about how we existed in each other's presence. I miss the ease and lack of caution. What I understood to be true, the safety I perceived, was because I did not have complete perspective. Committing to a right relationship means being willing to revise our practices when we learn that previously accepted habits might be harmful. It's true of the language we use and the ways we practice power. Now we know the way we steward our breath matters. I will leave the pandemic with better understanding of how to protect people around me from illness. May I recognize this awareness as a gift and use it to express care for the people around me. Take a breath and another. Be aware of breathing. And we're going to start a meditation thing sometime through, so we don't have our meditation bell, but I'm going to use this one. We'll take a few moments to concentrate on your breath. Where has it been? Where is it going? How many eons and eons has the oxygen breathed been in the universe? All right, not very good for a meditation bell, but we'll do better, we'll find one. The prelude, someone to watch over me, please. Someone to watch over me. Perfect. You can see by the first slide, this is a good positive father helping his son do something that is adventurous, learning abilities, and actually kind of dangerous, which is why you see Dad is standing behind him, protecting him, and actually letting him do it on his own. That's what fatherhood is supposed to be. This is what happens with fatherhood at other times. Sometimes the father is absent, and the effect that has on people's lives, particularly children's lives, is monumental. So it's something we don't want to forget as we move along. Our chalice lighting is Abundance by Dawn S-K-J-E-I Cooley. I think that's maybe Scandinavian or maybe Czechoslovakian. I'm not sure and I can't pronounce it. We light our chalice this morning, grateful for the love that we experience in this beloved community. May the flame light the way for all who seek abundance. Our opening hymn, we have handouts today if everybody got one. There's a hymn on each side. The opening hymn is Faith of Our Faith.
Faith of the fathers.
Yeah, did everybody get one? Okay. That's our theme today, Father's Day. So, fathers. Sometimes families have two fathers. And actually there are 13.6 million single families, 16% of them have a single father, and there are 40,000 families, this is according to the Bureau of Statistics, the Census Bureau, and they don't take exact numbers, but this is an extrapolation they've made. There are 40,000 families with 2 dads and no moms. Okay, our affirmation. Circle of Care by Lisa Bovee Kemper, and this was a Mother's Day affirmation, and I just kind of changed it over to Father's Day. In a religious community, we share our joys, our triumphs, our sorrows, and our broken places. In this circle of care, we make space for the complexity of life, the myriad experiences that bless and break our hearts. The truth of human experience dictates that on any given day, we each come to the table with hearts in different places. It is especially so on this day, invented to honor fathers. In this circle of care, we honor the truth that fathering is not and never will be quantified in one single descriptor. Fathering can be elusive or infuriating, fulfilling or confusing, commonplace or triumphant. It exists in the everyday experiences of each person. There is no human being that is not connected to or disconnected from a father. And so we honor the complexity of experience writ large in flowered platitudes, but here in this space laid bare, honoring the truth in each of our hearts, there is room for all in this circle. If you have fathered a child or children, whether or not they came to be born, we see you. If you have fervently wished to do so, and the circumstances of fate made it impossible, we see you. If you love children we cannot see, whether because of death or estrangement, we see you. If you never wanted to be a father, we see you. If you are happy to father other people's children as an educator, an uncle, or a foster parent, we see you. If your father hurt you physically or emotionally, we see you. If you had no father at all, we see you. If your father is or was your best friend, we see you. If your gender says you are not a father and yet you take on the role of nurturer, we see you. If you wonder whether your fathering has been enough, we see you. And if yours is a different truth altogether, we honor your unspoken story. There is room for all in this circle. May it be so today and always. Children's story. The top 10 things you'll never hear a dad say. Well, how about that? I'm lost. Looks like we're going to have to stop and ask for directions. Number 9. You know, Pumpkin, now that you're 13, you'll be ready for unchaperoned car dates. Won't that be fun? Number 8. I notice that all your friends have a certain hostile attitude. I like that. Number 7. Here's a credit card and the keys to my new car. Go crazy. 6. What do you mean you want to play football? Figure skating is not good enough for you, son? 5. Your mother and I are going away for the weekend. You might want to consider throwing a party. Number 4. Well, I don't know what's wrong with your car. Probably one of those doohickey thingies, you know, that makes it run or something. Just have it towed to a mechanic and pay whatever he asks. 3. No son of mine is going to live under this roof without an ear ring. Now you quit your belly aching and let's go to the mall. 2, what do you want to go and get a job for? I make plenty of money for you to spend. And number 1 thing you'll never hear a dad say, what do I want for Father's Day? Don't worry about that, it's no big deal. Actually, they might say this, but they don't mean it. Okay. Sharing your joys and concerns. The world has not improved since last week. Well, it has in some sense. But the problems in Palestine, even though we don't see it on the news, still exist. Flooding on the east and southeast, and actually here, mentioning flooding, there was about a teacup full of water in the basement stairway. So I think we had over 1.5 inches of rain, my rain gauge, like 4 or 5 miles south of here. So, but I think we're going to have to extend our little perimeter wall. We put it where the main leak was. I think we're going to extend it another 5 or 10 feet up toward the front of the church, dig it out, put tar on it, put a seal on it, and I think that will take care of that little teacup full of water that came in. Because it's kind of counterproductive to run the humidifier, the dehumidifier down there and have water laying Yes, Nancy.
So I hope we will continue to support those who work to mitigate climate change, because while parts of the U.S. are way too wet, the other part of the country is way too dry. Most of the western U.S. is under severe drought, and my mom said the temperature in Albuquerque for the foreseeable future is in the 90s somewhere, more like high 90s rather than low 90s. And I keep thinking, if they can figure out how to pipe oil everywhere, like why can't we figure out how to pipe water from places that have too much of it to places that have too little of it? But this is going to be sort of the ongoing reality of climate change. And so whatever actions, as small as they might be, that each of us can take to do our part to reduce our carbon footprint. Yes.
Yeah, we want to continue on that. Lake Mead, Hoover Dam is the lowest it's been since the dam was constructed. It's dropped, I think they said 137 feet. And they're going to start, I think we talked about this last week, they're going to start water rationing or water restrictions.
And that affects, it affects tourism, because there's a lot of tourism that's based on the lakes by those dams. But it also affects farming, because it affects how much water can be reduced for irrigation. It will affect urban areas, because again, some of that water goes to, is used for drinking water. And so we have a saying out west, whiskey is for drinking, water is for fighting over. There can be some access to clean water. It should be a basic human right on this planet, and for so many people it's not. And we're going to be, we only have to look at Flint, Michigan to know that. So not only, ways we contaminate our water, but the lack of access to water is going to become a real issue, not just in the U.S., but globally.
And I think I mentioned last week, they're using irrigated water, which there's a shortage of, to grow alfalfa, which they then bale and send to Saudi Arabia. And they're also using it to grow cotton, which we use to make blue jeans. If we're going to we need to be rational about how we cut down the use of water, and I don't want to put farmers out of business. But rather than see the people that grow lettuce or carrots or jalapeno peppers, those people who grow the food that we use here, I think we need to prioritize what's the most important use of water and what's the least important. And shipping our water to Saudi Arabia is not real high on my priority list. Yes, Mike?
Just a couple joys. One is a breath of fresh air and respect and cooperation from the G7 meetings internationally, a great joy internationally. A local joy, about 40 minutes of sirens going off Friday night before I was going to a much look forward to event. I stayed home instead, but our local area was spared of tornadoes.
Yes.
A few limbs down, but we are truly blessed. So both local and international, I guess, are my thoughts today.
And we need to mention Fort Recovery. 2 farms up there were hit pretty severely. If you watch the news, it was pretty rewarding. One of them was a dairy farm, and the other had hogs. And all the neighboring farmers were in with their trailers, picking up the cattle and the hogs, rounding them up and taking them to a safe place. So neighboring still exists. Even if they're flying a Trump flag out in front, I'll give them the kudos and the credit for being neighbors for people that they care about. Okay, I think that's just about everything we've covered. Joys and Concerns message is from Nancy. Before that, we're going to have What a Wonderful World. Mike and Roberta are going to do this. We've enjoyed it in the past, and we're going to enjoy it again today. Okay?
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white.
us today. She has a picture here which you can take a look at when you come up if you want to do the offering or after church. And when we get done, I'll kind of hold it up in front of the camera so you can get a picture. And Nancy can describe it to us too, because it's kind of dark.
Pictures of a Hispanic father and son. And let me also say, if anyone thinks this would be a great addition to your art in your house, or if you know of someone you might gift it to, I would be happy for you to take it with you. And it's called downsizing for me. So this may or may not be my last message here. I will try to come to the picnic on the 4th. I will probably be heading to New Mexico sometime around the middle of July, and we'll be gone at least probably through August, and then I should hope to sort of be there permanently maybe by the end of September. We'll see. As I tell people, that's a plan. It may not be the plan. We'll see how it goes. So on the hymn Faith of Our Fathers, my family, it may have been, do you remember getting albums like at the gas station, since all of us are really old? Or like as Time Life subscriptions, you'd get Christmas albums. Well, we had a Bing Crosby Christmas album that had Faith of Our Fathers on it, and I still to this day have not figured out how Faith of Our Fathers became a Christmas hymn. But there you go. So right after I had emailed Tim to say I would, or as I was emailing Tim to say I would preach this Sunday, it was like, oh, it's Father's Day. And I usually try to avoid preaching on Mother's Day or Father's Day. One, because they seem to be more about making money for retailers than Hallmark. And two, because I've heard a lot of really awful sermons on those occasions. And three, there's no biblical reason for them. If you just take the commandment, honor your father and your mother, the assumption is that there wouldn't just be one Sunday a year, but that should be a daily occurrence. So from a covenant perspective, every day is Mother's Day and Father's Day. But here I am, and it's Father's Day, so I will at least try not to give an awful sermon. Now, I've been known on Mother's Day to do sermons on some of the like the bad girls of the Bible. So the last time I was here, we talked about Tamar and whether or not she intended to act as a prostitute to have sex with her father-in-law. Or Rahab, the prostitute from Jericho, or Ruth, the Moabite woman, or Bathsheba, as examples of our foremothers in the faith. They're also in Matthew's genealogy of Jesus, so it works. So I started thinking about biblical fathers, and what I realized was how many of them are just really terrible fathers. If there are some quote-unquote bad girls who are foremothers in the faith, there's some really quote-unquote bad boys who are our forefathers in the faith. We'll start with Abraham, who banished his eldest son Ishmael and his mother Hagar from the family, and then nearly sacrificed his second son Isaac. I once heard from a comic festival, a British comedian talking about that story, commenting that perhaps Isaac was wondering if Daddy was going to pay for college tuition or not. So that's Abraham. Now Isaac played favorites with his two sons, preferring Esau over Jacob. And Jacob, who will become Israel, does the same thing in favoring Joseph more than any of the other sons. And the result of all of this favoritism is disaster in terms of family conflict, separation, death threats, and slavery. Now, Moses, right? Moses, he marries a Midianite woman named Zipporah, and who has 2 sons, but then seems to abandon them. So Exodus 18 tells us, after Moses had sent away his wife Zipporah, his father-in-law Jethro took her back along with her 2 sons. And you're going like, wait, when did that happen? It's a gap. The text doesn't say. Now we know from Exodus 4 that Moses returns to Egypt from Midian with Zipporah and the sons. Perhaps Moses was married more to the cause or the job. And after all the plagues and crossing of the sea happens in chapter 18, so sometime between Exodus 4, when Moses returns to Egypt with Zipporah and his 2 sons, and Exodus 18, where we hear that Moses had sent Zipporah away, somewhere in between there that happened, but we don't know the circumstances or why or when or any of that kind of stuff. But then after all the plagues and the crossing of the sea happens, Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, hears that all God had done for Moses and for the people of Israel. And then Jethro comes into the wilderness where Moses was encamped, bringing Moses' sons and wife to him. And he sends word to Moses, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and 2 sons. So you're thinking like, yay, family reunion. But there's no description of a joyful family reunion. At the end of so Moses greets Jethro like with kisses and stuff, but makes no mention of Zipporah or the 2 sons. And at the end of the chapter, we're told that Jethro departs. So whatever happened to Zipporah and the 2 sons? We don't know. So, yay Moses. Now, we should also admit that we tend to ignore or downplay the fact that monogamy is not a biblical mandate, at least not for men, especially for the kings, including David. So, the death of David's son Absalom is at the end of a long sequence of events. Amnon, David's eldest son, who would be in line to be the next king, rapes his half-sister Tamar. David seems not to care about that because he does nothing about it. But Tamar is Absalom's full sister, and Absalom takes revenge by murdering Amnon. Absalom then stages a palace coup and is eventually killed. And although David seems to generally mourn and express love for Absalom, but not necessarily Amnon, his eldest son, we really have to conclude that David was a terrible father. Now, I could add to this hall of shame, they aren't even the worst. Now, clearly we might say that these biblical fathers put the fun in dysfunction. In all fairness, I should also note that each of these stories, the mothers often seem to either be complicit in the bad decisions or they're just completely absent from the story. So I often end up wondering, where was Tamar's mother? Did Abraham tell Sarah about what God had commanded him to do? What was Zipporah's role in all of this? Now, you might think, well, that was the Old Testament. It gets better in the New Testament, right? Well, we don't know, actually, if any of the disciples were married and had children. If they did they just abandon them, leave them at home with mom to go follow Jesus? Did they take them with them while wandering around the dangerous countryside? I mean, it wouldn't have been like going out on one of the lakes in Indiana or Ohio for a nice Father's Day camping weekend. There's also this idea of asceticism that takes hold in the New Testament and the early church, leading to the tradition of celibacy, refraining from marriage and thus refraining from being a father. For example, we don't know if he was never married, if he was widowed or divorced. No wife or children are ever mentioned. In 1 Corinthians chapter 7, Paul writes, "I wish that all were as I myself am, but each has a particular gift from God, one having one kind and another a different kind. To the unmarried and the widows, I say that it is well for them to remain unmarried or celibate as I am. But if they are not practicing self-control, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to be aflame with passion." So I'm not sure Paul really should be writing the dating advice column in the newspaper or, relationship advice column. The Da Vinci Code notwithstanding, there's no evidence of Jesus marrying and having children, so we have no idea what kind of father he might have been. Now, if we imagine that Jesus was married, I have this image of Jesus' wife saying to his kids, "Why can't you be more like your father?" Then I got to wondering if Mary ever said to Jesus, "Why can't you be more like your father?" In my notes I have it both capital uppercase F, lowercase f, like divine father, human father. And so I sort of wondered at the ambiguity of that. Would Mary have been referring to Joseph or to Jesus' heavenly father? Which means we can also think of Jesus as having two dads. Which led me to think of Jesus saying at the end of the Beatitudes in Matthew 5, "Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect." Thus Jesus is saying to us, why can't you be more like your Father? Now, at this point, I could wander off to talk about God as Father, but I want to return to these biblical fathers. Thinking of examples of bad fathers was the easy part. But where I got stuck was in thinking about, well, what conclusions should I draw? Why does this matter to us that the Bible has so many examples of bad fathers? So here's a simple answer. Perhaps your own father wasn't a great father, whether by neglect or more overt forms of abuse. Perhaps you yourself weren't always a great father. Perhaps not as terrible as the biblical fathers, but you had your failings. Or perhaps you yourself never became a father, whether through choice or unforeseen circumstances. It might be small comfort, but there could be some comfort in knowing that at least you are in good company. There is a great cloud of biblical witnesses that you stand among. Here's a more complex answer to the question. Each of these men was also known for something else. God's promise of land, offspring, and blessing was given to Abraham when he was 75, I might add. And Abraham is known for his faithfulness. Isaac continued to live into that promise. Jacob becomes Israel, the father of 12 sons who will become the 12 tribes that become the nation of Israel, fulfilling at last God's promise. Moses leads the people out of slavery, and God makes another covenant with Moses that continues even today. David becomes the anointed one, the Messiah, the model of kingship that Jesus claimed. We today are descendants of those disciples and Paul who encountered Jesus and whose lives were transformed and proclaimed that such transformation was available to everyone. When we look at biblical characters, we tend to look at them as heroes to emulate or villains to avoid emulating. But in reality, most of them are portrayed like us, human beings who sin, fall short, and mess up, who are also righteous, faithful, and transformed. We can hope that we'll be remembered more for the latter than the former, and grateful that God will forgive us for the former. But what I like most about considering this is that it tells us that God was at work even in the lives of those terrible fathers and using them just as they were. You might think of the hymn, Just As I Am. I was thinking of Romans 5:8. quote, "But God proves his love for us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us," end quote. Even though Jesus says in the Beatitudes, "Be perfect like your heavenly Father is perfect," it turns out we actually don't have to be perfect or even very good for God to be at work in us. God is at work within us just as we are. Even now, God is at work within you as you are. Now, it seems obvious that I had a hard time coming up with some examples of good fathers in the Bible, but one example that we have is actually Joseph. We actually know very little about Joseph. He is not mentioned outside of the birth and childhood narratives in Matthew and Luke. Since Mary and his brothers and sisters are mentioned during Jesus' ministry, the assumption is that Joseph died before Jesus started his ministry. But when is unknown. The story of Jesus' birth in Matthew describes Joseph as righteous and obedient to God's covenant. But he also seems to be kind and willing to publicly disgrace Mary when he discovers she is pregnant and that he is not the biological father. Like Abraham, his obedience to God is emphasized when he takes Mary as his wife, as the angel of the Lord commanded him. In present-day Nazareth, there's a Catholic church dedicated to Joseph. One of my favorite art pieces there is on the outside of the church. There is a statue showing Mary and Joseph, each on one side of Jesus as a toddler holding one of his hands. I like it because we don't see many images of Mary, Jesus, and Joseph outside of like Jesus being a baby in the birth narratives, right? Now, perhaps you remember when you were a small child or when you had your own children, each parent on one side going 1, 2, 3, swing! and the kid thought that was just so much fun, and then you had to do it until your arm about fell off. But so looking at this statue makes me smile because I can imagine Mary and Joseph swinging Jesus between them. The statue depicts this holy family in a very tender way. Perhaps you've seen pictures that depict Joseph teaching Jesus how to be a carpenter, patiently teaching him the skills and art of this craft. And technically we don't know if it was woodcraft. The Greek word is teknon, perhaps builder. In other Greek literature is associated both with wood and stone. So he could also have been like a stonemason. But I think Joseph did more than teach Jesus a trade one could do to make a living. Proverbs 4:1 says, "Listen, children, to a father's instruction and be attentive that you may gain insight." I imagine that what Jesus knew of God's justice and righteousness, he may have also learned from Joseph's instruction. That Joseph would have instructed Jesus in the ways of justice and righteousness as carefully as he instructed in the ways of being a builder. And Jesus would have learned not only from Joseph's words, but also his life. In the letter to the Ephesians, fathers are commanded to bring their children up in discipline and instruction of the Lord. There's no evidence of this, but I can imagine the author of Ephesians adding, just like Joseph. So when I imagine Mary saying, "Why can't you be more like your father?" I can imagine she also meant Joseph. May this day we be instructed by our forefathers in the faith that God is at work in us as we are, and may we in turn instruct others in justice and righteousness.
Can I say to start, if you don't find anybody else to give the picture to, I think the church would be honored if you would present it to us.
Oh, I would be honored to do so.
My thought would be for somebody, one of our beloved presenters, we could start an actual memory wall somewhere and collect either, poems or pictures or something that somebody wanted to present. So
Yeah, a friend of mine gave it to me, primarily because it's a Hispanic family, and so knowing my, roots in a more Hispanic part of the culture. So I've cherished this, but I'm also happy to let other people cherish it as well. So.
I think it would be an appropriate memento and remind us not only of you, but also of New Mexico, and of fatherhood.
Others. So I hope it wasn't a terrible sermon. Mike?
I'm just curious, you talk about the poor models of fathers in the Bible. Obviously, there are some good models there too. But in terms of family structures, how parallel are the family structures of today with what we think of a tight nuclear family with that in the Bible?
There is really no such thing as a nuclear family.
Okay, what was the plan?
Especially among, you might think of peasant, lower class people would have been an extended family. The household would have had, the father, patriarch, whatever living sons were there with their wives. There could have been other family members, perhaps who had been widowed children, so it would have been a much larger household unit. So one of the things I did for my newest commentary was look at Roman era census forms in Egypt. Woo, that's a page turner. But it's really interesting because you can't always tell, okay, these two people live in this household, but it's not always clear what their exact relationship is. And the same man can be associated with different women at different times, but you can also have different women associated with different men. And the configuration of the household can also be like an ethnic mixture. There could be Jews and Egyptians, or Egyptians and Greeks. A Roman era family would have included the father, the mother, the children, and the slaves, as well as probably more extended family. So really the whole idea of the nuclear family is a modern construct. So.
And roles as well, what we consider masculine, feminine, paternal, maternal, any semblance of similarity there? So
in the Hellenistic world, there were more clearly defined gender roles. I actually find in the Hebrew Bible that things are more fluid than that. The thing is almost, certainly in the Hellenistic Roman era, those roles were very hierarchical, which is why you get the household codes where wives are supposed to, obey their husbands, and children their parents, and slaves their masters. So the well-ordered household was a hierarchical, patriarchal household. And what many of us want to argue is that we should not today be bound by Roman era values of 2,000 plus years ago. And to say even then, those may not have been the best values to uphold. But like with the story of Tamar, there were always people on the edges who, for a whole variety of reasons, did not conform to the ideal model, which is the same in our world today. I mean, the reason Tim is showing a picture of two boys with two dads is to say that even in our time, while there may be some general expectations of family structure, there are plenty of people that don't conform to that norm. And the issue even then, as it is today, is how do you treat those who don't conform to the norm? Do you try to force them into the box? Do you allow them freedom to live in their own models? I didn't talk about the story of Ruth, where you have two widows, and we have no idea of Boaz's marital status. Maybe he preferred hanging out with his workers in the field, But here are three people who, in different ways, who managed to sort of create their own family outside of some of the norms. Does that answer some of your questions?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we've talked about this before. I'm sure we could find a way for Nancy to record or broadcast so we can still hear from her from New Mexico. I to go back to joys and concerns. I forgot joys and concerns for my particular.
Maybe we could like do that the day before, so I don't have to get up at like 8 in the morning or 7 in the morning.
You don't have to do it live. You can put like 4 or 5 in a can, and we'll just pull
Yeah.
them out whenever we need one. I'm sure there's a way to do it.
I'll have to figure out YouTube.
Well, we may have to consult Emerson on, and it doesn't have to be YouTube. You could actually just record
Right.
with your phone
Yeah.
and then email it to me. I mean, we can go basically old school here and make it work, so we'll figure out something. Joys and concerns. I have a joy. My horse race in Scioto Downs last night. I got 4th, which not necessarily would be good, but he was racing against the horse of the year from last year, like the best horse in Ohio for the whole state. And that horse and the first 2 horses finished in 149, which is a blazing speed. And my horse finished at 150 point something for 4th, which I thought was pretty respectable. So I was really happy about that. Yes.
And I have one additional joy that I neglected to mention when I was focusing on international and local. My mind thinking local in terms of saving us from tornadoes, I forgot to share, and many of you may already know, that our friend Dick Brooks is on the road to better health, improved health, and great news about him from his doctors. And so I wanted to share that as well.
Good to hear.
Great news for Dick.
Good news for Dick. And health concerns. My partner, Margie Polhemus, that's Rick's wife. She's actually the breeder, the owner. She has quite a stable of horses, and they do pretty good. She had to fly to Florida for her ex-husband's funeral. While she was down there, she suffered chest pains, abdominal pain, and ended up going to the emergency room. So I have not heard exactly what's going on. She's back, and she seems to be all right, but she didn't want to talk about it, and I didn't ask her. But she actually takes these horses from Greenville to Indianapolis, Greenville to Columbus, Greenville to Lebanon. She brings them in her own trailer and delivers them for the races and manages everything. So she's got a pretty responsible job. And very important to what happens with my half of the horse too. I don't know if I have the front half and the back half, but they both have to go together. So, okay, offering. A River of Community by John Saxon. A religious community is like a river formed from many streams of our lives that meet and merge and flow to the sea. As members and friends of this religious community, we share our time, our energy, our creativity, our imagination, our vision, talents, and skills and gifts, and the streams of our individual lives to create a river that is both deep and broad. A river that is made of many streams sustains life and refreshes the land through which it flows, but the river of this community also depends on our shared financial support that makes real our shared visions and values. So, you're more than welcome to come up and put something in the plate. If you need something, take something out of the plate. If you're watching online, the online thing has a place where you can donate, or you can slip an envelope under the door. And we have, what a wonderful, no, Old Man River is going to be our offering play. And you can see by this slide, this is something they didn't have in biblical times. They had no idea what a baby daddy was, but there are a lot of baby daddies around, and you see at the bottom, it's time to dad up. This kind of refers back to our first slide of the absent father. There's a lot of absent fathers that need to take responsibility for what they're doing. Okay. And our closing hymn is also on your handout. This slide is one of the darker sides of fatherhood. The Simpsons are funny, but Homer's treatment of what's his name is not always, or Bart is not always the most admirable as far as fathers go. There's a lot of violence that goes on in families, and we need to be aware of that. We need to do whatever we can to alleviate that. Okay, closing hymn is God be with you until we meet again. That's on the back side of your other one. hymn is almost a meditation. I can see that we could use this again on a fairly frequent basis. So, yeah, collect these and we'll put them up here or put them somewhere so we can use them again. That's an excellent choice. Okay, our closing words. Our closing scene is the other, kind of the unseen part of fatherhood. As fatherhood kind of goes on to its eventual conclusion, sometimes fathers end up sitting alone on a bench with no one to care for them. That is one of the downsides of fatherhood that sometimes we don't look at on Father's Day. Okay, we can extinguish the... A Blessing for Traveling in the Dark by Jan Richardson. Go slow if you can. Slower. More slowly still. Friendly dark or fearsome, this is no place to break your neck. By rushing, by running, by crashing into what you cannot see. Then again, it is true, different darks have different tasks. And if you have arrived here unawares, if you have come in peril or in pain, this might be no place you should dawdle. I do not know what these shadows ask of you, what they might hold that means you good or ill. It is not for me to reckon whether you should linger or you should leave. But this is what I can ask for you, that in the darkness there be a blessing, that in the shadows there be a welcome, that in the night you be encompassed by the love that knows your name. Postlude, Going Home, presented by Roberta, a beautiful song by Dvorak. Okay, that ends our service from First Universalist at New Madison. If you have any needs, desires, please let us know. The virus is not yet over. The variant is coming from England. It is spreading in all the states. And as kind of we expected, it's spreading faster in the states where there's a larger percentage of unvaccinated people. So keep your mask, keep your hand washing, and protect yourself and protect those that you care about. And you care about everyone whether you know them or not, so let's go with that. Lemonade and cookies in the back if anybody wants any.